All right. Welcome to Hope for Healing Men interview series. I'm Nathan Benamaz of the Hope Network, and today I'm with Vince Bellitto, founder of Purpose Empower Coaching and Training. Vince is a transformational coach, trainer, and speaker. He's the founder of the Men of Honor Rising and Women of Courage Rising groups and the Core Encounter Group Shadow Integration, Inner Work, and Transformative Coaching Experience. And let me tell you guys, Vince is actually really good at what he does. And I want to create a space for him to share what got him on this journey and why he does what he does.
Thanks, Nathan. And it was also like to just acknowledge, our friendship for so many years. Like I've known you since about 2011, I think, or something like that. Actually met you through becoming my roommate. So it's just been a real delight and pleasure to have you in my life all the years that we've done a lot of work together as well. So acknowledging that, but thank you, brother, for having me here. I love what you're up to. I think the Hope Network is amazing, and I'm happy to be part of this endeavor that you've embarked upon.
Thanks, Vince. And fun fact for our viewers, Vince and I met through Craigslist. He's the only person I've ever met and maintained a friendship because of Craigslist. And I'm happy for it.
Yeah, love that. That was a great connection, man. Awesome. So thanks, brother. So a little bit about myself and like how I got into all of this. I think, it's just been a long journey for me. Growing up as a kid, there was some challenges that I faced. There was abuse in the home with my mother, one of my mother's boyfriends, and that was probably there was trouble between my mother and father, but it wasn't so severe that I witnessed anything severe. But it was when my mother met this particular guy, and there was a lot of violent attack against her, physical abuse that I was witnessing around 10 years old. That like my world radically began to shift. And I would just say that's when the sun went down, man, and it got really dark for me. And I was really scared inside. I was hurt. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get any help for the situation. I wanted it to change. I was so frightened. And, my access out of that was to, I was getting bullied actually in school, even I would say as a result of the fact that I felt so insecure internally within myself. I was just a magnet for bullying. Bullies look for weak. They're looking to prey on the weak. And I was feeling very weak inside, and because of that deep, deep sense of weakness and inadequacy, hopelessness, I found myself getting picked on a lot and challenged a lot, and it was frustrating. And the opportunity arose for me to, join a gang, and I took that opportunity, and that just began a whole new life for me. It worked as a survival strategy. I became, one of the in-crowd people, with the most, popular kids in the school. I had strength and support, and it was, it felt like, wow, I conquered this problem, but it led me into a world of violence and, drugs and drug dealing and all kinds of criminal activity, which was all really what I have now discovered, a compensation for that inadequacy, for that weakness, for that hurt. And it produced many problems. Back in 1999, I nearly died from a drug overdose because I was using drugs so heavily. And that was, for me, the turning point where I needed to start looking at myself and really questioning how I was running my life, what I was, up to, and what my future was going to look like. And I decided to make a radical change and cut off that whole lifestyle of drugs and crime, and began pursuing understanding of what life was about. What is our real purpose for being here? Is there life after death? Because I had almost died. I was terrified of dying now, and felt very lucky that I woke up, from having no pulse, no heartbeat, but I was just so frightened about all of that and uncertain, but I wanted answers, and I searched, and, that began this long, difficult journey, but also with a lot of magical qualities to it. But there was a lot of pain that I had to work through. And I would say that was the ground, the foundation for me really getting into this work, why I'm so passionate about working with men and women, but to help people really, heal these inner wounds, because that was what my journey was all about. The pain that I had felt was starting to surface as I got off the drugs and alcohol, as I began to just sit with myself in my Zen Buddhist meditation practice and just feel into my experience. And I just began to grow calmer within, but then more internally aware. And as I got more internally aware, the old memories started to surface, the violence and the abuse in my home, the hurt, the feelings, everything that was there. And all that stuff that was suppressed or repressed inside of me started to come up. And that was the beginning of me doing this work, right? I didn't have any real training about it. It was just natural. It was what was needed. It was what there was to do or to be with. inside of moving into a new life for myself. And I started to progress. I started to see improvement. I started to experience healing. I started to feel more wholeness. I started to come alive inside, and I started to develop a passion for living and this spiritual journey that I was on, and wanting to know more about it. And then I had a profound awakening internally that really lit me up. And I realized the interconnectivity that I have with everything in the universe, including every human being. And I got a sense of our origin and the innocence from which we all come from. And it implanted this possibility of forgiveness and acceptance and love that I could not even consider beforehand. I mean, I had conceptualized it in some of the books that I had been reading as I was seeking answers, but this was a direct encounter with something magnificent within me. And it was just open, spacious, alive, bright, beautiful, powerful. And it radically changed my life having that experience. And then I've just been in pursuit of how can I stay connected and aligned with that? And how can I help others get into alignment with that? So over the last 20 or so years, that's been the major question. And all of the work that I've done has been a pursuit in the sense of, how to get this work out there, on the extroverting side of things. And then the introverting side is how do I understand it more within myself, and how do I help take others to the internal zones and get them connected to that same experience for themselves. So that's really how this all began for me. And so everything I'm doing today, the things you mentioned, Men of Honor Rising, the Women of Courage Rising groups, the Core Encounter, any of my other coaching, training or events, or my facilitator training program, the Leadership Influence and Team Training program, all reflect my passion to see human beings discover this original innocence and magnificence, their full potential within, and also to face and feel and embrace and heal all the hurts and the wounding, the suppression, everything that's been denied and not acceptable. So, I would say that's really, it encompasses everything that I do today.
Wow. So let me recapture that. You started off life in a somewhat traumatizing experience, and then you developed a survival strategy that pushed you into a gang, and you found yourself empowered for what it was, but then you reached the ultimate conclusion of that, which was basically death. I mean, you didn't have a pulse, and you realized that that lifestyle actually doesn't work. And then you started looking for answers, and in your looking for answers, you actually opened up to your awareness of life itself and your ability to tap into a higher potential for yourself. And then that developed a I know you, so I can speak for this, that you've had a long journey of learning and integrating, and now you're teaching as well for people to explore both the inner and outer realities, and developing a greater sense of their potential because of the work that you've come to, which I actually want to speak to the pillars of your work. I assume you've kind of got it broken up into chunks of like authenticity. And I mean, what is it that, obviously this applies to more than just men. I'm sure it applies to women, but just speaking practically for men, what are the main tenets, would you say, of men being powerful, successful, and happy? I think happiness is important. What would you say those core things are?
Yeah, that's great. I have 3 core principles for the men's and women's work. It's integrity, authenticity, and success. And so those are 3 important dimensions of consideration: integrity, authenticity, and success. And then there are 5 pillars of transformation, or 5 abilities that we're working to develop inside of all the work that I do. So whether it's the men's groups, women's groups, or any of the other training programs, or my one-to-one coaching, the 5 pillars or 5 abilities are: number 1, awareness, just becoming more aware overall, and I could go into depth about what that is. Number 2 is communication. Communication is important, with self and with others. So that kind of builds on expansion of awareness. And then there's generation. Generation is the ability to really turn on the power in my system, right? To really come alive and to really, transmit the energy and aliveness that I am. And then achievement, number 4, and fulfillment, number 5. Achievement is the ability to get what we want, right? To set a goal and get at it. And then fulfillment is the ability to continuously feel a sense of value and worthiness and appreciation and acceptance and acknowledgement, of our own accomplishments in a sense. So I look at those 5 pillars. Those are also 5 dimensions of work that we're doing as very important. I think that encapsulates everything that we're doing. Inside of that is a whole bunch of stuff that it shows up like. And then the three, principles that I mentioned: integrity, authenticity, and success. Integrity begins with, especially with men, and since this is all men, men, I say, are in need of restoring integrity within themselves, which is why shadow integration becomes such a key component of helping men mature. Because the disintegrated parts of ourself, the rejected, denied, suppressed, unappreciated, unwanted, unloved, frightening aspects of my psyche and my memory, are the most damaging factors. They are the most troubling causes of my life. They're going to impede my relationship abilities to create successful relationships, know my purpose, live my purpose. The shadows are going to get louder and louder over time too. The more that we suppress them, the more we try to avoid them, the more we try to distract ourselves. And so, if I look at any human being who has any problems or issues in their life, we can find that there's shadows that are in control of that person's life, areas that they're not seeing. You could call them blind spots also.
Wow. So actually the word just came up, be with. You're helping people to be with those parts of themselves that they've been avoiding.
Yeah. And that's really what there is an issue with not being with it. I'm not okay being with my lust, my pride, my anger. I pretend I don't have it. My rage, my grief, my sadness, my joy, my enthusiasm, my curiosity. We could suppress, our shadows don't just contain dark and evil or damaging qualities, that we all agree are not healthy or maybe are lower level emotions. They also contain the projections of the greatness that we could be, that we're suppressing, right? So we look at other people, we praise and celebrate others, we think they're amazing, but we're denying our own amazingness. We're denying our own leadership, our own potential to be a magnificent, radiant, contributing male to the world. So we could be suppressing all that good stuff too, which is therefore a shadow.
So suppressing our power and our greatness. And then you touched on something that was actually leading me. It wasn't one of my questions, but I know a lot of men and women struggle with addiction. This inability to be with things leads to compulsive behavior. Absolutely. Would you say that just being with it, do you want to explain that process? Because you do a lot of work with people in addiction, and you've helped a lot of people to overcome their own pain and stagnation, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I'll just start with myself. When I started to sober up, no drugs, no alcohol, just meditating. So it's a really rough combination to do all at once. Like, I'm gonna get really sober and I'm gonna start meditating. And it's like, so now I have no substances that are distracting me. I also don't have all the old friends associations, and I cut all that out of my life. I mean, I cut it all out at once, and then I'm sitting with myself continuously for hours on end every day. It was like a little too much too fast, I'll be honest. Like, it was a little scary, and I say it's not necessarily the healthiest thing to do. I would not encourage anyone to do that without professional support and group support, even around when if they're trying to sober up and then start dealing with the shadows. Even if you're not an addict and you want to deal with shadows, you're just looking to improve performance, it's really much healthier to do with professional support and others in the space, because what comes up can sometimes be extremely overwhelming. And if you're not equipped and trained on how to be with that, which is the words you're liking to use, which I love, which is what it's all about, then we can react to what we discover in a way that's not healthy and can be damaging to ourselves or even others, So I had to be with my own pain and suffering, right? That came up because now I'm sober. There's no distractions. I'm not living a life of crime. I'm not avoiding confrontation with my shadow, with the suppressed pain and hurt and fear and the identity. Let's just say that there's an identity that was there, formed during these painful moments of my childhood, where I felt utterly helpless, powerless, weak, incapable, incompetent, whatever word you were going to use. And I shuddered when I came into contact with that. And I literally, like, my body, I started shaking, like my hands, like it was so somatically oriented within my physical self that it was overwhelming. And then the emotions that were there was this sense of sadness and grief, and then I fell right into total apathy, like right at the bottom of the scale. I just felt utterly worthless. There was no point to anything in life. It was like the bottom of the bottom. as much as that sounds scary and not something we want to do, it was the most powerful and important thing for me to have happen. Once I got in contact with that apathy, that complete and total, I give up, I can't do anything about this, I'm worthless, I was able to make peace with that. I did not have any of the tools, training, or distinctions that I do today. It was just more of an intuitive, natural process. And it happened all alone. I would fall into this hole of myself and then find acceptance for the whole. And it was just very natural. I feel very lucky that it happened that way. And that acceptance, once I was there and I was being with it for a little bit, it was not so bad. And so that was the very first experience of shadow integration in my life. That was about 21 years ago.
You mentioned something, and I want to draw a connection here. So you said you fell into the hole, you accepted that. I called you 2 weeks ago. We had a phone call. Maybe it was 1 week. I lose track of time, pandemic time. You you helped me be with where I was, and I wasn't giving myself permission to experience some sort of a difficult experience. I wasn't acknowledging that I was scared to step out. I wasn't acknowledging that I was scared of what other people were going to think. And you just gave me space to connect with that. Would you say that it was your ability to give yourself permission to accept yourself everywhere you are that has translated into your groups and giving other people that permission as well?
Yeah, man, absolutely. It wasn't automatic for me in the early stages that I was just speaking about. I also resisted what I was encountering, judged it. I shamed myself for what I felt. I also brought a lot of shame to myself for the drug dealing and the criminal activity. And, I started to get this conscience, and I really punished myself to the point of even abusing myself physically, punching myself in the face, slapping myself, smashing my head on the ground. There was so much anger in there. And that's why I say this work is really good to do with professionals, because there's a much easier way. The way I kind of went about it was very crude and rudimentary. And it was I'm fortunate that I kind of navigated through it. And I made a lot of mistakes in there too. Again, shaming myself and blaming myself when I discovered certain things. Now I know better, because I suffered the consequences of mismanaging the shadow. I made peace with some of it, but then I judged some of it as it showed up. And that led me to have some problems in life that I had to work out, and some severe relationship issues. And I've only recently in the last few years, started to really examine that and get really clear. And that's why now today, I supporting you the other day to allow you to have whatever you're having, my ability to be with that, because I really get the consequences of making any part of the self wrong. And that's counterintuitive to people a lot of times, because I just want to say this last part, because if I were to, what do you mean? If I allow my lust to be there, if I allow my anger to be there, I might hurt somebody. If I allow my lust to be there, I might do something I don't want to do. But the problem is we're doing it anyway. It's coming out anyway in some way, shape, or form. It's working. It's kind of leaking out in these weird ways. And so when we finally open up to it as it is, and we remove the shaming of it, we can finally accept it and get in touch with the underlying cause that's causing the compulsive behavior that, is leading people to have destructive, results in their life.
Wow. You opened up one of my most important questions. So I'm hearing shame is what's getting away. Obviously it's cross-gender, but this seems to be something I wanted to ask you was about the unspoken rules of being a man. Do you think there's unspoken expectations that men put on themselves that translates into that sort of shaming and guilting ourselves because we have a quote unquote unrealistic standard of ourselves?
Yeah, definitely unspoken rules, more like conditions in the psyche and the emotional nature that we learn growing up, right? Like I mentioned, a child, how about this? A child coming into the world has this 360-degree field of view and field of expansion potential. And so all 360 degrees, if there's sphere, right? And it's that sphere wants to expand. And as we relate to other human beings and to life, there are impedance barriers or things that resist or stop the expansion of our potential. And so those things happen before we even have language. So when you say unspoken, why is it unspoken? Because it's pre-linguistic, right? It's pre-linguistic. A lot of the imposition upon our expansion happens between the ages of 0 and 2, and 3, and, and all the way up until, we're 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. There's still a lot of factors that are letting us know societally in school, like what's right, what's wrong. And so there's a lot of external no's about what we can have, and, yeses to what we can. So we become conditioned very quickly, and those unspoken rules dominate us, both men and women. But yes, there's also a lot of expectation about how a man should be and shouldn't be, and what a real man is or isn't. And that varies depending on where you go. In my culture of growing up with Italians, and, you're supposed to be tough, dominating, the top dog, and in the criminal world, you're supposed to be the one that makes the most money, does the most damage, is the most violent. It just depends on what group you're participating in. There's other men groups, I would say, that have a different idea of what it is to be a man. And there's different unspoken rules, I think, that start to form and develop.
Yeah, I really heard, especially in your culture, but I don't know, I guess I'm like American, but I'm Israeli, Jewish, Polish, Christian. But for me, it was more the other way. We weren't taught to be dominating. We were taught to and it's probably not cultural. It's probably just more my parents. It's just a specific instance to retreat back, to kind of be aloof. And there's some passive aggressiveness. But I definitely resonate with the power struggle of being a man, and the expectation, because I was bullied when I was in elementary school. And I cried, and then I started putting an expectation on myself that I can't let that happen again. We moved to a new house, went to a new school. Actually, before that new house and new school, we went to a different new school, and I made darn certain that I was going to be the cool kid, and I certainly was. And unfortunately, that was short-lived, because now I was the new kid in a new school, and I was back to struggling to work my way up the ladder. But I had that contrast, and now looking back, I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I didn't get to assimilate fully into that, because I got to develop myself in a different way, where I feel I would have went down the wrong path. But what I'm really hearing in your sharing is this power struggle for men, and the struggle to allow ourselves to be authentic and to experience our emotions and our full self-expression.
Definitely. And that's really why the work I do is so important to me, because I know that for a man to truly mature and to be aligned 100% with his authentic purpose, right? Because we have inauthentic goals, inauthentic purpose, right? Like, I wanted to be a mafia kingpin, very inauthentic purpose, right? Not aligned at all with true purpose. Aligns with the contribution that I am for the whole of life itself. And that, aligning with that, is how I would define a mature man. A man who is living in alignment with his expression of life, that is contributing maximally to all of life, and from right in front of his face to his immediate family and relationships, to the world in a bigger scale. And I would say that would be the pathway for masculine maturing, if we're speaking very generally, like a broad scope. The inauthentic goals that men form are things like, I need to be the biggest money maker. Now, it's not wrong to make money, you know what I'm saying? But sometimes that becomes that's what it means to be a man. And we forget the other aspects of life, being a relatable, connected, empowering, nurturing male to our family, to other men around us, to young children, right? Or the protector of young children. We might forget those aspects of it, and we'll just go after the money to the exclusion of those others. In fact, maybe we'll pursue money and do things that are actually taking away from those other parts of life. And so men tend to fall in these boxes, these narrow pursuits, these inauthentic goals, or these narrow-minded goals, or narrow-minded sense of purpose, that end up destroying other parts of the whole picture of their purpose, and they don't even know that.
So how do men create happiness in their life and fulfillment?
That's a great question. My way is more of I prefer the subtractive method versus the additive method. I think where we think we need to add more into our life. I think when you come to work with me and inside of my groups, we're actually more into the removal process, or the undoing of things. I think that's how we become happy. I think, and what's great about that is that we end up adding more things into our life too. Why? Because the more we subtract out of ourselves, such as the false goals, the inauthentic goals, the inauthentic purpose. We start to subtract the false identities, the perspectives we had on ourselves, the very core identities that were against ourselves. We start to eliminate the negative conditions that we've perceived in ourselves or in the world. We start to move that out of our system. We start to make peace with all of that. As we empty, we have more room to receive. And so it's like we all know that we want to receive more, and that's going to make us more happy. For sure, that will. But the problem is we pursue the receiving or the getting and not realizing that you got to have room in yourself to let it in. Make space.
So I'm hearing actually removing the expectations and the rules that we're placing in ourselves. And of course, as you're saying, like, it's great when you have this rule to make money and you're making the money, but what happens when you stop making the money and now you start beating yourself up and shaming yourself? You're talking about getting aware of these things and removing these expectations and just having gratitude for life for what it is and being present in the moment. Like, I'm present. I'm here on a call with you, Vince, and we've been friends for a long time. And it's cool that, you know, we've gone through a lot of crap and we still have a great friendship. And, you know, most people, they can't even conceive why that's or how that's even possible. And, you know, just what so was, you know, I made a choice and I decided to look at myself, which actually, that brings me to my final question. You know, I got responsible for my part of the equation and things that didn't work in our relationship. And because I chose responsibility, there was no impact on our relationship. In fact, our relationship's better than ever. But what would you say in the world of responsibility? Like, there's things going out politically, you have families breaking apart, you have a lot of things are kind of in a negative slant in the world. How can men be responsible for what's happening in the world and make a positive impact?
That's a good question. First, I would have to clean up the view that there's a lot of things going negative in the world, as if that's something new.
It's always been, yeah. We're just more present to it.
Yeah, well, more or less, maybe. There's never an absolute going down or an absolute going up. Life, to me, for a man, I think a man needs to realize that there are no absolute perspectives. They're just so, like, it's like when you look at stock charts or something. You can look at a 1 minute chart. You can look at a 5 minute chart. You can look at a year chart. Sometimes you're looking at the 1 minute chart and the stock's going right like this, and it looks like it's falling down like crazy. But if you were to switch to a year chart, maybe that stock has been trending vertical for an entire year pretty much. And so you have a different angle on things, right? And so it depends. Do you have a myopic or very narrow view of what's going on? If you're just looking at politics right now today, and you're looking at the economic situation just today, then it looks like it's going like this. But if you take a broader perspective, the reality is humanity has been actually progressing. Even with climate trouble and all that, we are way high compared to where we were in the survival orientation of being human. Way high.
So it's relative. You're saying it's relative.
It's relative. Okay. So the first thing to do is stop making things worse than they are, right? And stop making things better than they are and start getting broader perspectives.
And making them wrong. Like, there's nothing wrong about what's happening. It's just happening.
Seek understanding, right? Like, there may be impacts that may not be healthy. So I think we gotta withdraw from that a little bit and start expanding our viewpoint, because we can't make a difference with narrow-minded focus. You know, we have to be able to dial in and see, specific problems in narrow areas for sure and deal with them. But we don't want to just try and go fix, one little thing that's wrong and not understand the greater system as a whole, because then we're missing out. So we got to understand both worlds, but we have to have a broader perspective and think first and foremost, and then dial into the more niche areas that need our attention. The other thing is forget the world and take care of yourself. Codependency, essentially is about trying to control and change other people, right? And the focus is off of oneself. The locus, the center of my attention is not me. It's others. It's the world. It's something other than myself. Well, I think the most responsible thing a human being can do is just be more responsible for himself, or herself, right? And then when it comes to men, it's like, are you managing your personal internal integrity? Are you dealing with your own shadows? Because what people don't realize is that our shadows cause us to project onto the world outside of us, either on people, politics, the world situation. the emptiness we feel inside is what we see out there. So your worldview is going to be colored by your self-view. But what happens is most men are getting trapped in the worldview or the relationships view or the career view, and they see all this negative or what's wrong and don't realize that that is just a reflection of what's going on internally. So unless the shadow integration is being done, those viewpoints will never change. The world will always appear to be falling. People will always appear to be not showing up for you. The business or career path that you're on is never going to be enough. It will never, ever happen because our perception is colored by our internal shadows.
In fact, the world doesn't have to mean anything for anyone's life. More millionaires were created during the Great Depression. So even though the news or something might be saying one thing, I think what I'm hearing is for men and women, but this is a men's conversation, to be responsible for their lives in such a way that they get to own the creatorship of their life, that whatever's happening on the world doesn't affect them, doesn't affect us.
Right. And realize that news is a viewpoint. News is a viewpoint. It's just it's a peephole into a particular dimension. And if you were to just say, well, let's just think about when all the chaos was happening with, the protests and, there's some riots taking place and all that's going on. Yeah, there's stuff going on in the world. And I'm saying I'm all that, but in reality, a lot of people are getting stressed out and all in a tizzy when there was nothing they were going to do about it anyway. And there was really nothing impacting their life, their situation. Like in my home, I'm watching CNN and I'm like, oh my God, CNN headquarters is getting attacked in Atlanta. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like 45 minutes for me. But the reality was, if I'm just staring out, the birds are flying around my window, the birds are flying, the chipmunks are running, and, I could see butterflies and flowers and trees. And it's like, oh, my immediate environment is safe and it's good. The news is a viewpoint. Most of us don't realize there's a lot of news we should be taking in that we're not taking in. There's a lot of good news. There's a lot of great news, but there's a bias in some of these other news channels and news viewpoints, and they tend to be negative, and they're not that way for no reason. There's something that can be created out of that that's beneficial to certain people. And I don't want to be ignorant of what's happening in the world, but I also don't want to let that color my view entirely.
So what you're saying, and this is a great place to wrap up our conversation since we have 3 minutes till 3, that people get to control the information they're consuming, and we should be consuming enriching information, not information that takes us down. And that's the mission of the Hope Network.
There is no information that takes us down or enriches us apart from our conscious creation, right? Information itself is just information. If the world,
I get that, yeah.
Right? It's like, it's who am I being? And am I in command of my own system of thought and emotion? Am I generating myself today? Because I can look at negative news, so-called negative news, and not be offended by that or hurt by that or diminished by that if I'm in command of myself. But if I'm throwing myself out to the world, and I let my life be determined by what's going on out there, which is what a lot of men are unfortunately doing because they haven't done the shadow integration. So they don't know their personal power. They are diminishing what their potential is unconsciously. Then they see the world out there and it sucks them down into a deeper hole because that's what's already there inside of them. I don't think there's anything out there that's hurting a man or anything like that. I think it starts inside. You change the inside and then the outside starts to become something you can manage and handle and perhaps transform.
So it's a self-choice, and we got to be responsible that we're seeking out the information that is really magnetized to what we have going on inside of us. And this is part of the reason why we created the Hope Network, was to share information that increases awareness and possibility.
Yeah.
And I believe this is what you're up to with the men's and women's groups. And I want to, we only have a minute here. I want to give you a minute to just share how people can get connected to that and get connected to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, brother. First, love what you're doing. And yeah, you're bringing new other perspectives. You're bringing in the good news that's available in the world. And you're showing people that there are connections that they can have with other groups and communities that are supportive and nurturing and that do inspire hope, that it's not all about the negative. And there are people who are up to good things in your community. I think that's great, man, and all the communities you're serving. But yeah, go to thecoreencounter.com. That's TheCoreEncounter.com. The Core, of my being, like the center of my being, the core encounter. And I have an upcoming free event, November 10th, that people can register for in the evening and get an introduction to what the core encounter is all about. We'll talk about shadow integration, group shadow integration, inner work, and all those wonderful things we do, transformative coaching, and what the core encounter is all about. So people can learn about that and how to do this work, start to make peace within themselves, and draw on that reserve of potential that's just been stifled by all this incomplete and repressed emotion and attitude and perspectives and experiences of life that they just haven't really opened up to yet. So that would be the best way. And the menofhonorrising.com, womenofcouragerising.com can register for our free men's and women's groups. They're not going to be free always, probably for the rest of this year, but come 2021, we'll have a membership-based fee or something like that. So, but yeah, man, it's really a pleasure and a delight to be here with you, Nathan. I think what you're up to is really great. The Hope Network is phenomenal. It's a brilliant idea. It's your best ever. I'm behind it 1,000%. Happy to contribute and support you in everything you're doing, brother. So thank you.
Thank you. And I've attended a bunch of your groups. I've done long-term groups, and then I've just done one-offs with Vince, and he's great at what he does, and he's got a great community forming and really awesome heart-centered people. And there's a lot of people that are looking for healing right now. And there's things that are very difficult to be with and to handle. And I encourage you, if you're looking for a community, you can connect with Vince, or can come to the Hope Network, where we have a bunch of different communities you can find from a whole range of things. And we just thank you for being here, Vince, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next interview.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Sending blessings, brother.
Bless you, brother.
Okay, take care.
Bye.